welcome. On behalf of Sarah, Roman, Ben, and Emery, I want to welcome you to this ceremony where we're going to remember and celebrate life and mourn the passing of Stephen Christophel. You know, Stephen was not a traditional person, and anything traditional he shied away from. And I remember Stephen, anytime anybody would start saying something that he wasn't quite so sure about, or he didn't quite think he could, you guys remember that? I remember it well because I think he did that just about every time one of my kids told him a story. And there were just a couple things when we were coming in this morning that I could, I think, audibly hear Stephen doing that. Seeing Stephen's face on a church jumbotron, I think, was definitely an E moment for Steve. I think seeing everyone dressed up in suits and ties, I don't think I ever once saw Stephen. I don't even think he'd recognize me today in a suit and a tie. And so today, to celebrate Stephen, to really capture who Stephen was, this isn't going to be a super formal event. We just want to take some time and have some people come up and talk and remember Stephen and celebrate who he was and remember who he was. And Stephen loved to laugh. He loved to tell stories, and we want to be able to do a little bit of that this morning as we remember who he was. So with that, we're going to start with a letter from Sarah that we're going to have someone come up and read.
Hi, my name's Brenda, and I had the privilege of watching Sarah and Stephen and then all of their children grow up together. So this is a blessing for me. Stephen James Christophel. I loved using his full name. It usually followed him teasing me or saying something wildly inappropriate just to get a reaction. I would shoot him a glare, and he would wink at me. I think he thought a wink could fix just about anything. Most of the time, he was right. Stephen was my very best friend and the love of my life. We married when we were very young, and statistically, it should not have worked. But boy, did it work. We would often laugh and wonder aloud how we got so lucky to find our soulmate at such an early age. We were married for 17 and a half years and together for 21 years. Our marriage was a true partnership. It had peaks and valleys like all relationships, but we chose to grow together, to cheer each other on, and to be intentional about one another. Our love was deep and passionate, playful, tender, and safe. I will always feel like the luckiest girl in the world to have been loved by him. Stephen was such an amazing father. He had found this beautiful rhythm of working hard to be sure that they had every opportunity and need provided for while still being fully present in their lives. He wanted our children to feel seen, known, and loved. He had an incredible knack for cracking a joke in the most serious of conversations and making them smile, sending us all ridiculous memes over our family chat, and busting the craziest dance moves in our kitchen dance-offs. Our children never had to wonder if their dad was going to show up for them. He was there cheering them on in anything they chose to do. Roman, Benjamin, and Emery, your dad was so very proud of you, and he's still cheering you on. Stephen was a man of resilience. He battled and fought through really hard things that he should never have had to walk through, things that should have taken him out but didn't. He chose every single day to fight to be the very best version of himself. His drive for health in every area of his life was one of the things I admired most about him. Stephen had this crazy ability to connect with just about anyone. He would often come home from work and tell me about the deep conversations he would have had. People felt safe with Stephen immediately and would share their stories with him. One thing that always blew my mind was the amount of gifts he brought home. He was there to sell a roof, and someone heard their whole life story. Somehow he heard their whole life story. He would come home with a new houseplant, a coin for his collection, or muffins. The most memorable gift from a customer was a pet bird. Stephen has always loved birds, but I still don't know how that happened. His ability to connect, love, and accept people right where they were was most evident through the tribe of people he surrounded himself with his most authentic self, and he called them family. You know who you are. He loved you all very deeply. So much of this is still so hard to fully understand, and I'm not sure I ever will. I feel broken and lost, and I just want to wake up from this nightmare. You're not supposed to bury your spouse in your 30s. I know I speak for Stephen and me when I say how grateful we have been for the incredible outpouring of love and this family has felt and been shown these last few days. You have helped us through some of the worst days of our lives, and I will be thankful forever. Stephen James, you are my heart. You will always be a part of us, and I will love you forever and always.
Stephen was a very special person, and he was so encouraging to so many people. And I feel very honored to be able to sing this for him because he always loved music so much. And he was always very intentional with his words. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to singing in the dead of night. Yeah, take these sunken eyes and learn to see. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird, fly, blackbird, fly, blackbird, fly.
Let me start by saying Steve was a horrible poker player. About 5 years ago, there was a big Friday night poker game at my house. Steve and his son Roman came over. Roman was there to play with his good friend Micah, my son. And Steve, well, he was there to lose his $25 buy-in, which he readily admitted as the first round of cards were dealt at 8 o'clock. About 9 o'clock, Roman happens to pop into the dining room to see how the game is going. Steve had just lost a hand, and he was out of chips. First one out of the game. Roman, and I'm sure you can envision this, right? Roman, Dad, already? How did that happen? Are you kidding me? I'm not ready to go home. Needless to say, over the years, we have frequently revisited that story many times. It goes something like this. After a player was knocked out of the game, if this was the case, it would be, well, at least I stayed in longer than Steve. This group of men standing up here with me, and a few that aren't present, is part of Steve's chosen family, his brotherhood. Over the last 4+ years, our motley crew has created a safe space, whether we're playing poker or sitting around a fire. We can be messy, share our stories, experiences, and dreams while receiving acceptance at all times. As someone who experienced judgment in life, Steve chose to engage others with questions and curiosity. Judgment is not in his relational toolbox. If you haven't experienced Steve this way, let me share. We'll be sitting around the fire pit, and Steve will just fire off a deep existential question that usually would result in a silence or kind of like, Or he would easily disarm you with a silly joke that helps to remove any barriers to a deep conversation. You would never quite know his approach. I came across this quote a few weeks back, and I feel it helps to capture part of Steve's essence. The ability to ask beautiful questions, often in very unbeautiful moments, is one of the great disciplines of a human life. And a beautiful question starts to shape your identity as much by asking it as it does by having it answered. Steve was one who inquired, examined life. He was a thinker, a philosopher, if you will. But he didn't just keep the thoughts to himself. He would reflect his observations to help others. Recently, I was sharing something with Steve that was causing me pain. He listened, and his response was, "You say that a lot." With that one phrase, Steve let me know he saw me and helped me see myself with compassion. I've witnessed Steve's growth as a man, husband, and father who has come to live in the midst of questions instead of chasing answers. Knowing Steve for almost 20 years, he used to be frustrated with not having answers, and it affected his relationships with himself and with others. But over the past few years, part of the beauty of Steve's evolution as a person has involved embracing questions. Now, back to poker. Last summer, Steve ended up being one of the last two players. It was late. Late at night is actually early AM. Everyone had left, and I decided to go to bed as well. Legend has it that Steve actually won that game, and he never let us forget about it. I could chalk that game up to luck that he won, but as I reflect back, I see that as a reflection of Steve over the past few years, more free to be himself and trust himself. So those are skills that are helpful in poker, but I believe more so brought peace and fullness in his life. Steve's laughter and love, goofy jokes, sincere reflections, and comfort with uncertainty will forever be a deep loss for all of us. But his spirit will continue to live among all those whom he loved.
Hi, my name's Bethany. I'm Steve's sister. Stephen was the best for a million reasons. He cared so much. He was the best conversationalist. His love of nature, his crooked smile, his dad jokes, his gut laugh, how he loved birds, and his blunt honesty are just to name a few. And in loving memory of Steve's blunt honesty, we are going to acknowledge that his death is absolutely the worst and so unnecessary. When originally writing this, I used multiple expletives to describe what it actually is, but for the sake of appropriateness, I'll keep it PG. Steve's death, although I don't think Steve would want me to. Steve's death is not some part of a beautiful plan. Steve was supposed to travel with his family, drink Moscow mules, and just be a part of this world. And that's not gonna happen, and that's not okay. I'm angry about it, you're angry about it. We're all, insert expletive, angry about it. It's not part of a perfect plan. He wasn't needed for the other side. He's not a beautiful angel, none of that. It's just awful, plain and simple. Another thing about Stephen that absolutely blows my mind with how amazing he is the amount of effort he put into being a human being that he himself was proud of. He wanted his family to know that he loved them more than anything else in the world, and he was well aware that the coping skills and emotional language he spoke at one point hurt them. Because of that, he put countless hours into learning about himself through therapy, medicine, exercise, and self-contemplation. Those deep questions that were just referred to, that was Steve thinking about himself, and he just applied those to himself so sincerely. He became a man who knew how to communicate love and fun and to be able to experience life in a way that brought joy to his life and the people he interacted with. So I want to refer back to my initial statements of how this is horrible and ask some self-retrospective questions in honor of my brother. If it made you uncomfortable to hear less than happy thoughts about my brother dying, if that made you uncomfortable that I didn't say there's a reason for his death, that he's needed on the other side and all the comforting cliches, then why? In honor of Steve's life, let's sit in uncomfortable feelings for a bit. Let's be the humans that Steve was and become better people by learning about our hard emotions. Let's not cling to cliches to make ourselves quickly feel safe. Let's venture out into areas that feel uncomfortable and learn more about ourselves. Let's do therapy, exercise, medicine, and self-contemplation so that when we die, our closest people will say that this isn't fair, this is awful, this should not have happened. Being Steve's sister for 34 years was a gift that I could not be more grateful for, and that gift doesn't end. The man he was and how he loved me by letting me be the ugly, beautiful, happy, sad person that I am is a priceless gift. And as I speak for myself, I'm 100% confident that I speak for many. I know without a doubt that Steve's family could not be more obsessed and proud of him. Every time Sarah, Ben, Emery, and Roman talk about Steve, pride is at the forefront of their words. They loved his humor, his quirks, his ridiculous dance moves, his lack of rhythm, and his blunt honesty, and his sense of humor. Speaking of his sense of humor, have you heard the pranks he did in college? I've heard these stories secondhand from him, and happily I heard them on repeat. They were my absolute favorite. He and his buddies hid all the hymnals from his college chapel, and when they brought out backups, they hid those too. There's also a picture of him and his buddies in one of their dorm rooms with all the fake greenery and bushes from that same chapel. They did an Adam in the Garden artistic rendition where they stripped down but used the greenery to make the picture safe enough for a kid's Bible picture book. Luckily, they never tried to publish. There were many other pranks. Find his roommate Russell for a continuation of those stories. Sorry, Russell, if you weren't prepared for that. So, all that being said, Steve was a prankster, and I love that about him. On the day he died, I decided that I was going to see Steve in Signs of Nature because that's where he felt most at home. He loved nature. I decided that while on a walk with my boyfriend, ironically and happily also named Steve, so I said that very weird. I decided that while on a walk with my boyfriend, ironically and happily also named Steve. We were in town, and when we headed back to my house, there on the sidewalk with no trees around was a bright blue robin's egg, validating the decision I made. And then 2 nights later, I'm eating dinner, and there's a dead honeybee in my salad. Literally the next morning, a dead fly is floating in the syrup in one of my waffle squares, like some prehistoric resin preserve. I can't be convinced otherwise that if Steve heard this story, even if those were just a coincidence, he would have thrown his head back and laughed that familiar deep laugh and claimed those pranks as his own doing, and said, "That's hilarious." So again, in honor of Steve, let's feel all of our humanity. Let's be angry, sad, and laugh so hard we cry. Let's do all these things without shame, because that's what Steve learned, and that's what Steve lived. That the crazy expanse of our humanity is what makes life the beautiful chaos that it is.
It seems all wrong to share these memories without Steve here laughing along with me, or adding in all the details that I've forgotten. Because my favorite memories of him actually involve laughter and telling these stories with Steve. We both attended Lancaster Bible College together in 2003 through 2004. We also attended the same church and led the same youth ministry and shared the same student housing called Mary's House, which was a part of Global Disciples that housed students including Krista, who's here with us today. I remember one time when some of the young kids who lived next door to our student housing called us. They were apprehended by the police at the Dollar General for stealing, and their mom couldn't come pick them up. So Steve volunteered to pick them up and help them pay for the silly string that they had tried to steal. He loved those kids and he felt compassion for them. He invested time in getting to know them and created all sorts of fun things for them to do at our house so that they would have a place to hang out without getting into trouble all the time. I wish you all could have heard Steve tell his version of the silly string story, because he would shake with laughter every time he tried to describe the loud clanging that came from the children's cargo pants as they tried to sneak out of the Dollar General with multiple cans of silly string jammed down their deep pockets. He helped me learn how to speak up for myself and encouraged conversations with the church trustees when we tried to get the neighborhood kids to be able to use the skateboards in the nearby church parking lot. We had long late-night discussions about theology in our Bible classes, and I still remember the powerful way he described his discovery of grace. My favorite memory was when we attended church at a neighboring Mennonite church that sang four-part harmony. Steve's college roommate sang his heart out with little to no awareness of how loud he was singing or how to sing on tune. The sound was indescribable. I noticed Steve starting to shake, and he was trying to hold his laughter in. His face got so red. I just watched Steve fight this laughter for a while until I started to laugh, and we were both trying to be respectful and quiet and super mature. But after the benediction song, we raced for the back door, ran across the church parking lot into the front door of our house, and dissolved into laughter. We were doubled over, and every time we recall that story together, we again end up with the best belly laughs. As poor college students, we had fun by exploring nearby abandoned buildings or trying to bake our own desserts or dumpster diving for our next meal. He always went dumpster diving for food, and I would try to convince him to swing by the Joanne Fabrics dumpster for all the crafting supplies and yarn. It wasn't always easy when we were in college. We were both working multiple jobs and taking extra classes and struggling to pay the rent and bills, and despite all the quirks that I had and feeling sick a lot due to struggling with Lyme disease, he was always so encouraging and compassionate towards me. I knew he always had my back. He was good with checking in, and he often had the ability to say just the right thing to make me laugh. I never realized how much that meant to me until I took time this week to look back over our Facebook messages and texts. Inevitably, our exchanges would begin with him sending a quick question and a hello, just wanting to know how I was doing, and always ending with a beautiful edge of humor. Another memory I have was the time that Steve came back from visiting Delaware with money to buy meat. Where he got that money, I'll never know for sure, but I suspected it was Grandma. He went to the grocery store and came home with a giant roasting chicken. One of the aunts sent him a recipe, and he started cooking it, and it made the entire house smell so delicious. So for us college students who had been eating cheap noodles for way too long, the smell was tantalizing, and when he pulled that chicken out of the oven, Krista and I stood above him, just staring at it, begging like little puppies. He graciously invited us to taste it, and then he said he needed to leave and he would be back real soon. I'm ashamed to say we did not stop tasting that chicken, but we kept on eating it until there was barely anything left. And when he came home, I don't remember what he said, but all I remember is the complete and utter disappointment all over his face. He teased me for years about that. Steve was a really good cook, and he could make amazing food from very little ingredients. I remember visiting Steve and Sarah soon after they were married, and still remember the marinated mushrooms that he grilled for us. More recently, Randall and I began meeting Steve and Sarah halfway between Lancaster and Maryland. A bunch of us cousins would enjoy dinner and dessert and all the laughs, and his care and compassion made him feel often more like a brother than a cousin. He was on a beautiful journey of healing and grace, and he talked openly about finding health and peace that he needed for his family. This feels like it was all cut off way too soon. He saw things that others didn't always see, and he often said things that others didn't say, but he had a way of doing that with grace and compassion. Sarah, you were everything Steve ever wanted. And when he was dating you, while he lived at Mary's house, we would laugh at him because he would unashamedly stare at your picture and hold your belongings and go on and on and on about how beautiful you are and how much he adores you and how he can't believe that you would fall for someone like him. You were his world, and he was so proud of each one of your kids too. When he found out that Roman was on the way, he became determined to give you all the best life he could, and he did that. Roman, he was so proud of you. And Benjamin, he would have fought the world for you. And Emery, you were his shining glory. We would laugh at him about how you all had him wrapped around your little fingers, and he never denied it. You all were everything Steve ever wanted. You gave him the best life. Thank you for loving him so well and being the home and family that he always wanted.
a really pretty little song that I find is really beautiful. I always saw Steve's love for Sarah very much, and it was very apparent and very inspiring. So I just kind of want to bring that forward. You got your demons to the seasons to the dark side. Don't try to deny, 'cause I know that I've been there too. Right now I know how it feels, like the world's gonna end. But I'll get you through. It's the last thing I do. I'm gonna love the hell out of you. Take all the pain that you're going through, and I'll bring you heaven if that's what you need. 'Cause you've always loved the hell out of me. You brought resounding techniques from my grounding, so I lost all a little too far from the moment to find some solace from all this exhaustion and monsters mind. So you better know that I'll hold you close, and I'm gonna love the hell out of you. You take all the pain that you're going through, and I'll bring you heaven if that's what you need. 'Cause you've always loved the hell out of me. Yeah, I'll bring you heaven if that's what you need. 'Cause you've always loved the hell out of me. You've always loved the hell out of me.
Steve loved music. He also loved the movie Gladiator. I think every time I was with him, he somehow worked that into the conversation. Was either a quote or a, hey, have you seen Gladiator? You remember that part in Gladiator? And if it wasn't Gladiator, it was the book series Red Rising. I'm not sure if anyone out there has made it through the at least 3-book series trilogy of Red Rising. I did. Steve was very, very happy, and it gave us something to talk about a lot. You know, if you haven't seen the movie Gladiator, it's the life of this Roman general, Maximus Decimus Meridius, who finds himself as a gladiator. And there's this part in the movie where he's trying to get his troops excited, and he says, what we do in life echoes in eternity. I think we've heard up here enough about Steve to know that who he was and the way he impacted people will continue to echo in our life and all throughout eternity. His heart, his love, the love for his family, the love for his friends, all of that will echo in eternity. And just a reminder of how we are to love and how we are to treat one another. And I'm so thankful that I had that example of Steve in my life. The movie is also about a man who is separated in death from his family, and his whole goal is to reunite with his family. And in the end of the movie, he is finally reunited with them. And there's this song that they play. It's called "Now We Are Free." And it begins to play as he sees his family. Steve loved that song. He loved to play it. And for those lucky enough to hear him, he loved to sing it. And so what we'd like to do for you now as we close out this ceremony is play that song for you as we remember Stephen.